What's a disturbing fact you wish you could unlearn? Story 1. Once I read that as a research project, someone put a fake turtle in the road to observe driver behavior, and something like 8 of people deliberately went out of their way to hit the turtle. Edit. Someone pointed out it's 6, not 8, my bad. Story 2. There's a condition called Cotard's delusion, where a person genuinely believes they're dead, like fully dead, but their body just hasn't noticed yet. Some even stop eating or ask to be buried. The mind is terrifying when it breaks. Story 3. When I had open heart surgery nearly 20 years ago at age 28, the doctors places pacer wires in my heart just in case they needed to stimulate my heart electrically after the surgery. My words, not theirs. So I wake up and find 2 yellow copper electrical wires sticking out of torso. Later that day, the nurse came to remove them. This is done by simply tugging until they come free from small hooks or barbs on the end in the heart wall. The nurse warned me in advance that I'd feel my heart physically pull down in my body. She was not kidding. It was unpleasant to say the least. But now, years later, I literally can't forget what it feels like to have someone tug on my heartstrings. Story 4. Lots of creatures eat their newborn if there isn't enough resources to go around. At age 12, I learned this by discovering the small half-severed pink bodies of hamster pups while changing their mom's cage litter. Apparently, she wasn't just a cuddly soft huggable ball of fur. Story 5. The whistle of an artillery or mortar shell falling towards you is actually the deviation from its trajectory, and where you're currently standing, the closer you are to where it'll land, the less you hear. If it's a direct hit, you won't hear anything at all. Story 6. That there are some states where medical students are permitted to do pelvic exams on women when they're under anesthesia without asking permission beforehand. Story 7. The mouth and anus share similar nerve endings, which is why eating something spicy can cause a burning sensation both when it goes in and when it comes out. Story 8. It was believed for a long time that babies do not feel pain and no anesthesia is required when a surgery is performed. This only started to change in the late 1980s, after mom of an infant who underwent open heart surgery without anesthesia started a campaign to raise awareness. Whenever I think of it and imagine those poor babies who had to go through an excruciating pain, with muscle relaxant that prevented them from moving and fighting back on top of that, I'm in tears. I don't understand how medical professionals could have subjected them to such horror. Story 9. The number of women who have experienced traumatic brain injury (TBI) due to domestic violence is estimated to be 11 to 12 times greater than the number of TBIs experienced by all military personnel and athletes combined. Story 10. Dominant female meerkats will kill the pups of subordinate female meerkats, then force the subordinate females to feed her babies as tribute or rent to be allowed to remain in the group. That is hardcore AF. Story 11. I used to remind coworkers of this after particularly nasty jobs when I worked as a paramedic. When you smell something, that means microscopic particles of what you're smelling have floated into your nose and sinuses and bonded with a scent receptor. It delivers its message, and then your body breaks down the molecules, and either they get removed from your body by your snot, or they get broken down and become you. Always good to reflect on that when you're dealing with a lot of or decomposition. God, I was such a LOL. Story 12. How much of modern medicine relies on a hunch or trial and error? Before I worked in a hospital, I used to think doctors knew everything and that curing illness was straightforward. That will apply to some diseases, but there are many, many more which are vague and treatment isn't really well established or doesn't always respond as you might expect. Makes you afraid to get sick after a while. Story 13. There are more slaves in the world today than at any other time in human history. According to organizations like the International Labor Organization and Walk Free Foundation, an estimated 50 million people are living in modern slavery, including forced labor, human trafficking, debt bondage, and forced marriage. It's unsettling because it highlights how widespread and invisible these systems can be, even in supposedly advanced societies. Once you know, you start seeing the signs in supply chains, industries, and global economics. Story 14. Basically every scene in movies where someone dies in lava is wrong. Your body is 80 water, and molten magma or lava is just rock that's so hot that it's in a liquid state. Rock is a lot denser than water even in a liquid state, so you wouldn't sink into it, your body would float on the surface of the lava, burning to a crisp while you scream in agony. Actually, it might be even worse, given that when water, i.e., the water in every one of your cells is suddenly exposed to extreme temperatures all at once, it instantly boils. If that exposure is fast enough, it boils explosively. And since your body isn't a perfect sphere being exposed to the 800°C lava all at the same time, what might actually happen could be parts of your body explosively boiling and popping as little steam explosions rupture your burned skin as you burn alive, floating on the superheated rock smoothie. Story 15. Untreated dental infections can lead to abscesses on the brain that result in a brain injury. A 40-year-old guy went from bad teeth to paraplegia and brain injury, from living a normal life into a group home on government benefits. Story 16. There could be someone in your social circle, note I didn't say friend group, that hates you enough to kill you, and you probably never see it coming. Most murder victims knew their killer, and they obviously didn't see it coming. What makes you different? Edit. Y'all are tripping if you think you're smarter or more observant than them. It's adorable, really. Edit 2. Yes, there are some cases where they saw it coming, but look at them, dead anyway, doesn't change my point. Story 17. That kid Cameron Robbins who jumped over a ship into shark-infested waters and was literally devoured in seconds. Makes my head feel fuzzy when I think of that poor kid. There was also someone recently who was hiking and fell down a steep slope towards a volcano and couldn't get up or move at all without slipping further in. She was stuck there for days, slowly dying from exposure and the toxic fumes, and oh god, that one really messed with me too. Some people are just dealt a hand. Story 18. I noticed some spots on my puppy's eye 2 weeks ago. Took her to a dog ophthalmologist. Turns out they are dermoids, which are stray skin cells that are growing where skin shouldn't. That's not worst part. There's a hair growing out of one of the cells. My puppy's eyeball is growing hair. Edit. I also nicknamed her Hairy Spotter. Story 19. We got a dog that had heartworms. They got treated and are doing perfectly fine now. The thing is, it prompted me to look into them. They're spread by mosquitoes and can live in most large mammals. So what stops humans from getting them? Nothing. The answer is nothing. They just aren't harmful to humans because they can't breed properly in us. You and I might have a few right now, and that goes for most parasitic worms BTW. Story 20. Unit 731. Japanese experimentation on the human body in the 1930s and 40s. Never ever read up about it. I feel sorry for the poor authors on Wikipedia who had to type up and edit that article. Story 21. Dead people will moan or groan well after they've died. The gases produced from decomposition have to escape the body somehow, so it's either that or the other end. Story 22. Your body doesn't know that you have eyes, and if you ever get an eye infection, your body could begin to attack your eyes, leaving you blind as it goes to attack the infection. Story 23. A dingo really did eat that woman's baby, and everyone still just makes fun of her to this day. Put your phone down and sit in silence for 30 seconds while you imagine what it would be like to 1. Be eaten alive by a dingo, and 2. Find out that happened to your baby, have nobody believe you, and become an international laughingstock. What the guys? Story 24. Coffin births. When someone who is pregnant dies, as gases build up in the body from decay, it can push a baby out. I think the first records of this happened in Pompeii. Story 25. When the Soviet Union launched the street dog Laika into space before launching a man, they had no intention of bringing the pup home alive. Though they provided for food and water, they didn't plan for her to come back to Earth. She lived a few hours and likely died from heat-related stress. The capsule orbited for a few weeks until our atmosphere and gravity dragged it back in, burning up during re-entry. This has always been a sad story to me since the day I learned it long ago. Story 26. That our universe could actually be made with false vacuum. The vacuum between elemental particles isn't completely void, but has some minimal energy. However, it's possible to speculate that this minimal is only a local minimal, and that something even more void could exist. If that's the case, a change in phase could create a bubble of true void somewhere in the universe, that would be expending, erasing everything. If such a bubble exists nearby, we would have no way of knowing as it expends at light speed. Basically everything can disappear at once, in a flash and without any warning. Story 27. The father of modern gynecology J. Marion Sims did the majority of his surgical experiments on black slave women with no anesthesia. Due to the belief that black people couldn't feel pain, he performed the surgeries and tests without consent, sometimes over and over again on the same woman. Fistula surgery. In addition to Anarcha, Betsy and Lucy, Sims writes, I got 3 or 4 more to experiment on, and there was never a time that I could not at any day have had a subject for operation. But my operations all failed. This went on, not for 1 year, but for 2 and 3, and even 4 years. Story 28. There's a term called gift giver, which is someone, usually a gay man, that knowingly infect their partners with HIV. People that go after them are called bug chasers. Story 29. The meaning of the song Pretty by Korn. It's about a true story of a baby raped by her father with her legs broken backwards like a rag doll. Absolutely vile. YouTube Korn Pretty. Story 30. People can become so constipated that they vomit feces. Doctors then have to insert tubes down the nose to the out of the nose in order to empty the stomach. Story 31. For pretty much any chemical you can buy, the manufacturer has to be able to provide you an SDS, a safety data sheet, which tells you all about the dangers of it and how to deal with it in emergency situations. Most of these sheets contain the consumed LD50 lethal dose for 50 for rats, meaning that's the quantity where if you feed it to 100 rats, 50 of them die. Many will also contain the topical LD50 for rabbits, meaning the quantity where if you coated 100 rabbits with a chemical, 50 of them would die. When I go to a store and look at the aisle with cleaning chemicals, I start thinking about all those animals force-fed or coated with chemicals and dying in misery. Story 32. Air travel is not very safe or secure at all. TSA misses 95 of contraband and 50 to 70 of weapons when hidden by the average person. A professional is virtually impossible to catch at a TSA checkpoint, which is why no-fly lists are important. In one of the TSA tests where they used a former CIA agent, he was able to smuggle 5 fake guns, 20 knives, and a bottle of fake chloroform in his carry-on. In another concerning bit of information from Mythbusters, the various shops after your security check sell everything needed to create over 24 types of bombs that could destroy a plane. An anonymous insider released a list online in hopes of forcing the airlines and airports to stop selling certain items. The Mythbusters thought it would be a quick myth to bust and started testing the list. The Mythbusters discovered the list was in fact real and right. The Mythbusters handed a list of the base ingredients to the TSA, but most airports refused to stop selling the items due to those items being very profitable and started to track purchases of those items instead. At least the Mythbusters canceled that episode. But the list that started all this still exists on the internet. Do note that trying to find it can get you put on a no-fly list. Story 33 that 2 twin boys died from being circumcised in New York after a rabbi sucked on the children's penis and gave them an STD that ultimately led to their deaths. It was totally legal, but since then it's now just a fine. In addition to this, circumcision is undoubtedly genital mutilation that traumatizes children and hurts men's sensitivity. I am glad I learned about this, but sometimes ignorance is bliss. Story 34 if you look at a map of the US of where people go missing, and overlap it with a map of the cave system, they coincide almost exactly, so that explains one thing, and sort of explains why ITLL happened again. Imagining how many people must have died screaming in starving darkness gives me chills. Story 35 anosognosia is a condition where the brain literally cannot understand that something is wrong. Happens to like 40 in psychosis, stroke victims, and more. This is why you can't reason someone through a delusion. They psychologically cannot understand that they are delusional. LEAP is a therapy tactic where you try to reason someone through as gently as possible, and you still run the risk of it failing. This is why I no longer use schizopsychotic delusional as an insult. Story 36 as a kid I always thought that the grown-ups had everything under control. As an adult I realize that every single person alive is an idiot, and it frightens me. Story 37 the real sick in human trafficking and human cruelty. It just breaks your heart how evil and cruel people can be to other humans. Sometimes you just want to exterminate us, the planet of humans. When you learn the level of cruelty we are capable, it makes you lose trust in humanity. Story 38 when they pull all of your organs out for surgery, they don't rearrange them back inside of you, they just kinda mush everything back in and your body figures it out. Story 39 that a man who stopped talking to me in September 2022, but I still have feelings for, died in April 2025. I found out on June 14th. I wish I wouldn't know it because now the love I still feel hurts so much. Story 40 Christopher Columbus met mermaids and went into graphic descriptive detail about what the insides of them felt like, including his crewmen. They were manatees. Story 41 Chinese nationals have come to Zambia in Africa bringing food, clothing, resources. They seek out needy local people who are hungry, malnourished or homeless and offer them food, clothing and shelter if they will work in Chinese-owned local brothels and businesses. Story 42 Well, since I am in the medical field, I guess I will tell you one of my biggest surprises. There is such a thing as a fecal transplant, and it's exactly what you think it is. It's abbreviated FMT for fecal microbiota transplantation, so someone who is missing their good gut bacteria get an FMT to help restore their healthy gut bacteria. A healthy person donates there, and then it is given one of 4 different ways: through a colonoscopy, through an enema, through an upper endoscopy, that's right, starting in the mouth and going down, and finally in pill form, so yeah, your doctor can tell you to eat and be perfectly serious. Story 43 I've lost count of how many vitally important things to the world's ecological health are on the verge of collapse, and I wish I could be blissfully unaware of how close we are to a very avoidable ecological disaster. Story 44 Korean comfort women. It's literally nightmare fuel. I had to read some Korean War refugee book where a young child, her mom, and her sister presenting as male survived WW2. There are multiple almost caught moments. I became an adult, and now looking back, I realized they weren't afraid of being killed. They were terrified of being alive under the Japanese army's care. Story 45 The laws of physics are not set in stone, and can change at any time for any reason into anything. Studies suggest this has happened a few times already. Story 46 That the FDA has a list of allowable contaminants per food type. For example, when mass-producing chocolate insect contaminants, the chocolate in 100 gram subsamples contains an average of 60 or more insect fragments per 100 grams. Or any one subsample contains 90 or more insect fragments, even if the overall average of all the subsamples is less than 60. Rodent contaminants The chocolate in 100 gram subsamples contains an average of more than 1.0 rodent hair per 100 grams, regardless of the size of the hairs or hair fragments. Or any one subsample contains more than 3 rodent hairs even if the overall average is less than 1.0 rodent hair. Source, FDA Gov. Story 47 The realistic number of humans in slavery around the world. It is staggering. The numbers is minimum of 250 million and probably closer to the next big number. Story 48 The staggering number of young girls that are sold off for rape and indentured servitude under the name of marriage across the world. The number of preteens sold to men usually over 40, and knowing what it happens to them for the rest of their lives is a fact about our species I wish I could unknow. I saw a video couple days ago here on Reddit of a girl, who couldn't have been older than 13, screaming for her mother and crying on her wedding day as her new husband roughly threw her up onto the back of a horse to take her away. Brutal. Story 49 That in Canada we have a program called MAID, which is medical assistance in dying. To be eligible, you just have to be 18 and have a serious and incurable illness, disease or disability excluding a mental illness until March 17, 2027, be in an advanced state of irreversible decline in capability, have enduring and intolerable physical or psychological suffering that cannot be alleviated under conditions the person considers acceptable. Story 50 When my kids are at school and my wife is at work, I could call the cops and report a body in my shed. The cops would find me so my family wouldn't have to. I'm not going to do it, but the possibility being there makes it harder to stop the thoughts because for years I didn't want my family to find me. Now sometimes it feels like a big safety net is just gone. I wish ID never realized the fact the possibility exists. Story 51 prisons are just legal slavery, and getting rid of them would automatically drop crime by 7, especially when you consider how much violence and abuse and torture happens in them, just by prison staff. Story 52 when you dream, your brain releases tiny trace amounts of DMT. This is why dreams can sometimes feel longer than they are. It causes your perception of time to expand in a way. When you die, seconds before total brain death, your brain releases 2,000 times that amount of DMT in a frantic attempt to calm itself down right at the end of life. The scary part, how do you know you aren't dying right now, and time just feels normal because your brain is being flooded with chemicals in an attempt to make you feel better about your death? How do you know this is real? Story 53 I needed a colon resection diverticulitis. I signed permission for student doctors to observe the procedure. As I was waking from anesthesia, I heard a student say, "Man, did you see that? He had his whole fist in there." I never asked where there was. Story 54 Black hole triple systems exist V404CYGN. One outcome in this unstable system is that one black hole is ejected. The speed of the ejected black hole would be expected to be near light speed. Said black hole cannot be seen nor detected by points on its trajectory. Story 55 that there's a theory that our universe is part of a never-ending cycle, where at some point everything will contract back together to a singular hot point in which another Big Bang will occur and this entire thing starts over again. Story 56 the low end of the statistical range suggests that at least one of males are primarily attracted to prepubescent children. That means you probably know a handful of pedos and there are probably millions of them in the US. Story 57 all scientific points lead to death just being the end. I wish I could believe that there were a heaven and everlasting happiness ID you made it in. Story 58 all your organs have the same touch receptors as your skin, but your brain doesn't register the impulses as it'd be too overwhelming, so if your brain didn't block that you could feel all your organs touching. Story 59 from Annie Jacobson's book Nuclear War a Scenario, I gleaned the following: hope the stats are right, but if not exact they are close to what was written if nuclear war breaks out between the US and Russia, based on war games from the 80s. Within the first hour 50 million people die. The northern hemisphere is uninhabitable for years to centuries depending on sites hit uranium storage at a nuclear power plant versus no nuclear material, and likely 90% of the Earth's population will die within the first year. I did not sleep well after reading this book. Story 60 killer whales are the only natural predator of the moose. But because of their unique interactions the moose never really gained a fight-flight response, meaning that one species will always be prey and never know it forever long. Moose and killer whales exist. Story 61 lots of police departments around the country have several backed-up rape kits that haven't been tested. That means there are an enormous amount of unsolved rape murder charges because the labs simply haven't gotten to testing all of them yet. We have the database. All we need is the legwork. I've listened to some heartbreaking podcasts about parents who fought endlessly to get their deceased daughter's rape kit tested for matching DNA. Imagine knowing the solution to your daughter's murder is in a building in your city in a drawer somewhere, and you are told you have to wait until they get to the other 200 or so rape kits that haven't been tested. Some parents don't even get the chance to get closure before they pass themselves. All of these potential solved homicides and all of the dangerous people still at large that committed them are sitting in evidence buildings all around the county just waiting to be tested. I think about that when I'm driving past a police station. Story 62 that they used to use baby chicks to keep elephants standing still in a box while flying. Elephants are emotionally aware enough to deliberately not step on a chick and kill it, also because it would cause stress to the other chicks. Can you imagine? Cruelty on so many levels. Ugh. Story 63 pretty much everything in the documentary Earthlings, narrated by Joaquin Phoenix, about the treatment of animals across the world. I saw it around 2006. I will never be able to cleanse my memory of the fox having its fur unsheathed from its entire body from tail to head while it's still very much alive. The way it throws its furless, earless head back, mouth agape in silent, unimaginable agony. Story 64 that in the United States there are regions where a brain-dead woman will be forcibly kept on life support, against the will of all parties involved save for the state, and made to carry a fetus to term and then have that baby extracted via autopsy from her corpse. Yeah, learning that one put me in a bad state for a while. I thought we got rid of that sort of state-sponsored sickness when we hung all those Nazis. Story 65 the Super Bowl is the biggest weekend in the world for human trafficking anywhere in the globe. A large percent of successful business people are sociopaths with no sense of morals when it comes to environment, the future, or children. They are so successful because of the any means necessary motivation. The reason the US wanted Afghanistan is to produce opium to destabilize all the people in that region the same way the Mexican cartels funnel drugs into the USA to help destabilize the USA. The drug war is not a war on drugs, but a war using drugs to destabilize entire populations around the globe. CIA operatives tortured Abu Zubaydah in Guantanamo over 80 times through waterboarding. No additional information was given up the 5th time, or the 80th time. CIA officer Oliver North helped drug kingpins move crack into California to help Ronald Reagan fund his Iran-Contra affair. Ronald Reagan's wife launched a Just Say No campaign while Republicans worked tirelessly to invest in private prisons, to lock up the same people who brought the drugs from the government. Story 66 the entire Junko Furuta case, nothing before or after has ever done more harm to my faith in humanity. It's not the terrible things they did, while sickening, others have done worse, it's how many people knew about it, either took part in it, or just did nothing, long story short as possible. A teenage girl was kidnapped, raped, tortured for months, then murdered. There were 4 main perps, but dozens of people connected to those involved in the crime knew the whole time, and did nothing. There were claims that the main perp also invited random friends not part of the main 4 to rape her as well. Some claimed they were afraid due to one of the perps' ties to local gangs. Others clearly just didn't give a. The parents of one of the perps blamed the victim's parents for ruining their son's reputation. Imagine being that kid. How many people saw her, and how many times did she think someone amongst them would save her, or alert authorities, or just have some basic level of compassion enough to do literally anything, only for it to not happen, and then society at large failed because the main perps were minors, so they all got slaps on the wrist. And everyone else involved was nebulous and had some level of plausible deniability. Somewhere out there still are dozens of people who were actively aware or participated in the rape, torture, and murder of a girl who did nothing but turn down a psychopath and his friends, and they're walking free, living their lives. The entire case makes me completely unable to trust humanity at large, because while there might be something uniquely Japanese about not making waves to that level, it shows that humans can become that, dozens of cowards at best, monsters at worst, all just waiting for the right circumstances. Whenever I have the misfortune of remembering the story, I find myself teetering on the edge of fantasies about supervillainy, like I just want to throw all of mankind into the sun, call it a day, the human experiment has failed and is beyond salvaging. Story 67. The majority of Americans never read a book after high school. This includes college graduates. Something like 75 don't read anything that is not work-related. Of the 25 that do read, around 90 of those only read the newspaper news online. There is functionally no difference between someone who can't read and someone who won't read. Story 68. The murders committed by the toolbox killers and the fact that there exists an audio of them torturing a woman Ledford. That audio was the most damning piece of evidence and caused people in both the jury and audience to weep. Reading about how they kidnapped, raped, and murdered these young women make me wish there's a special rung in reserved for people like the 2 monsters to spend an eternity in. Germany sponsored putting abandoned kids with pedophiles. Experiments started in the 60s. Last kids left the program in 2000s. The whole show was government-sponsored research, so it had to go through the ethics and funding committees, and nobody put a stop to it for decades. Story 69. You know when you're eating pistachios and every once in a while you get one that tastes a little off. Yeah, that's larvae. I love pistachios, but it's been hard to eat them since learning this fact. Story 70. During slavery in the United States, slavery wasn't just for picking cotton or free labor. There were handbooks specifically how to break down your slaves and how to treat them in ways that will dehumanize them the most. Literal handbooks written on how to treat your slaves in the worst ways possible, how to destroy their culture, their language, their minds, their bodies, etc. It was so much more than just free labor, and how much I need to reiterate that. Story 71. Whenever history books media society want to downplay an event, they use black and white or low-definition photos to artificially inflate the feeling of time passing since the event. Color photography was invented in 1880s. It started becoming mainstream in the 60s. Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated in 1968. I've never seen a color photograph of him used in a book or on TV. Story 72. I won't say it happens a lot because I do not have any specific statistics, but you know those tragic yet heartwarming stories about starving kittens and dogs that are found on the street and rescued. Shows their recovery journey until they are happy and healthy. There is no guarantee the shots are in real order. Grab a healthy kitten, slowly starve it to death, re-edit the footage and post for karma. Story 73. There's a type of tumor, known as teratoma, that can grow hair and teeth. I would not look it up unless you have a strong stomach. Don't say I didn't warn you. Story 74. I read that doctors dissolved a human brain with acid which left only the microplastics behind, and the weight of the microplastics was the equivalent of 1 plastic spoon. Story 75. That capitalism isn't broken, it's working exactly as designed. And to that end there must be losers for it to function. The economy was never built for the bottom 95. We're just labor, consumer, and data inputs to feed the system that serves the top. And if they have their way with AI scaling, they are attempting to make it so they don't even need us as inputs anymore. They won't need us to consume or labor for them. So we will just be in the way in the future. Good luck to us. Story 76. That the current US regime was in the works since Reagan. I mean, it was technically always trying to get here since the Confederates lost the war, but things really took a nosedive after we elected a racist movie star with Alzheimer's. Story 77. What I learned today on my way home from work. I'm still shaking. I'm afraid of my future now and how things will unravel after this knowledge. For the first time in my life, I finally had the perfect job, perfect boss. I've gone through to get to this point. I figured I had to go through all the hardships to get to this point. Today that idea was destroyed. My boss wife says she needs to speak to me. I call her as soon as I get off. It turns out she thinks her husband is having an affair. My jaw dropped. I was not expecting this at all. I truly believed he was a faithful, loyal family man. I've grown to be close to him and his wife over the last 5 years. I'm close to her mother also. I never would have guessed he was like this. Not in a million years. Apparently he's been cheating on her for 15 years. He has a cheating problem. He likes the chase and conquest. They have 4 children together, junior high to college ages. She cried to me. She was hoping I would have some sort of confession, but I didn't. I would never ever consider any man in a relationship. The thought disgusts me. She told me then it must be that he's infatuated with me and it must be all him, one-sided. I told her there was nothing romantic about our conversations ever. Yes, we joke around, but this is with the entire office and there's nothing or romantic about it. All this time I thought I was safe from this type of situation, and here I am again, back in this horrendous predicament. She told me the last employees he cheated with, he fired her because obviously he's never leaving his wife and family. I had to listen to all the details of this person I clearly knew nothing about, a stranger to me. Not the person I thought he was. I had to calm her and reassure her that there was nothing going on between us. I was trembling at the thought that she would believe such a terrible thing about me. My heart is broken for her, for their children, and even for myself now. I have no doubt she will tell him she confronted me because apparently she always confronted the other women and him in the past. She told him she knows he's cheating. Today is just the first I'm learning about this, and she decided to involve me. I'm terrified of losing my job now. I don't know how to act the same as before towards him now. I don't want to give him any impressions. She proceeded to tell me that she believes it must be me that he has a crush on and wants to conquer. Even if I don't feel the same way, this is a nightmare. I'm a single mom with 2 kids and 2 dogs. I need my job. I need this job specifically for so many reasons. Another job just won't do. I'm shattered at the thoughts of what will happen next. This bullshit always happens to me. I wear scrubs all day. I wear a mask for 7 to 8 hours. My hair is always in a clip. There is nothing sexy going on here. I can never trust anything or anyone, and it's so isolating that I have to live like this. Married men thinking they can attempt anything with me because they are my boss. I'm so tired of this bullshit. Feels like I'm losing everything again. I can't keep going through this. I can't tell anyone about it, and there's no way I'm sleeping tonight. Story 78. I have a good few, because learning medical disorders is a hobby of mine. Cephalic disorders, particularly otocephaly and cyclopia, agrepnia excitata, total insomnia, complete inability to sleep, which can result in death. Fatal insomnia prion disorder, goes in 4 stages. Usually inherited, but can also be sporadic. Morvan syndrome, characterized by itchiness, decreased need for sleep, and significantly decreased REM and short-wave sleep, sometimes to the point of agrepnia excitata, REM sleep behavior disorder, which is movements during sleep, and other symptoms, and delirium tremens, a terrifying disorder caused by sudden severe withdrawal of alcohol. Story 79. Once, on my uncle's farm out west, I saw a lightning strike straight down into a field, and it killed a couple of dozen cows instantly. Not one could be saved. Story 80. I'm not going to say it for what will soon be obvious reasons. But, while taking my psychology degree, we learned of a theory that has been proven to be detrimental to your mental health just to know what it is. Like, you don't even need to believe it, just the simple fact of knowing about it makes you a little depressed and a whole host of stuff like that. Just by knowing about it. I legit asked why do you teach it to us then? Answer was because it might be true. Great stuff, did not make me feel any better. But that is actually why it makes people feel depressed. It might be true. Story 81. That organ donation companies are actually more after your skin and long bone than your organs. There is money in skin. They can do numerous things with it. The way a body looks after skin and long bone donations is something families would be devastated if they saw. PVC pipe stuffed in the legs, with old rags, loosely sewn together, feet just flopping around like a jellyfish. They aren't interested in your organs unless you're a child or teen, and sadly most people say he donated his organs so others could live. High chances are he was skinned and deboned, but no organs were taken.